process, his lord had to face off against the Knights of Avalon, including the Imperial Knight Order. He was worried because this was going too far because his noble family might be eradicated as soon as he became a count. What would he do with his followers for him to cause such a big issue? He was worried because Duke Agnes wouldn't survive because of Joshua. While he was worried about this, he heard two knights gossiping that it was pretty unfortunate for the off-duty battalion commander because he would have to face off against the most decisive knight order in the Empire, the Imperial Knight Order. Because Galahad, who was guarding the third Imperial Prince, has returned, they wouldn't even get the opportunity to face him. Knight Galahad du Lancelot said that he did come to bring Joshua to his knees. It was not his intention to steal everyone else's opportunity, so if the other two wished to face him first, they should. Cain wondered if, by duty, battalion commander, they were talking about his lord Joshua, and he was dumbfounded to think they would bring him to his knees and was furious as they dared to insult his liege. He was going to fight with them, but someone put his hand on his shoulder and told him to stop. He was terrified as he couldn't even feel his presence as he approached him before he placed his hand on his shoulder. He heard that all the knights of the Avalon Empire had gathered, and he wondered who this incredibly skilled man was. He looked back and started crying after seeing the protagonist and requested that he not hide his presence as they moved around. He thought he was having a heart attack. Joshua instructed him not to make a fuss as he shouldn't forget the place he is at right now. But Cain can't just leave those cocky people to insult him. The protagonist tells him that, unfortunately, with his current skills, he can't even win against them because that Galahad fellow is someone the Imperial Knight Order commander has selected as his successor. The knight came toward him and commented that he was as good as the rumors said, and he could recognize him at a glance. He uttered that he was honored to see him personally and was looking forward to his spear and sword crossing at the bloody Battle of Verch. The protagonist finds it absurd and wonders what he means, so he elaborates that he should guard the Third Imperial Highness. So why is he at the Empire? Laughs. He believed it was a bit excessive for him to leave his affiliation with the Imperial family to create an independent knight order, and he was somewhat surprised because it had been a while since he left Acadie. But still, he knew him. He wished to have a deeper conversation with him now, but as he had many things to prepare, he would leave after only greeting him, so he excused himself, but he will be awaiting the bloody Battle of Bircher. Cain asked him if he was someone he knew because he was someone who had just been insulting him, but he came and acted all friendly, and he was furious and said that, of course, he knew him. He remembered that he was one of the followers who betrayed him and led him to his death, and he thought he had met him at the perfect time. Still, as he wishes today, he will tear him apart limb from limb on the big stage and fulfill his first act of vengeance. Cain requested the protagonist to be on his way since it would start soon, and the protagonist asked him if he was also going. And he said yes because he should also take care of them all, so that they wouldn't be able to touch a strand of hair on his head. He agreed and thanked him as he was very comfortable, so they decided to leave. At the Imperial Grand Training Grounds, the ruler of the Avalon Empire, Emperor Marquis, announced that all the Knights of Avalon should grant them an opportunity to become the husband of the Imperial Princess. The rule is simple. It is a death match where until only one man stands, they will fight according to the bloody Battle of Bircher. When the final man standing is left, the battle will end, and it doesn't matter how many days and nights it takes, so he orders to commence the bloody battle immediately. The 4th Battalion member in the Huddles family's second son wished to cross swords with the Rand Master Joshua first. Aaron, the member of the 3rd Battalion and the 3rd son of the Frank family, wished to attack his 2nd, 3rd, and 4th opponents, but Joshua suggested not to be like that in a tone as there were no rules against this time. He uttered that they should cast away their worthless pride and barge in all at once because he didn't want to waste his time on all of them, which made them all furious. They decided to do as he wished and asked not to resent them later. They all attacked him at once, and he used magic spearmanship stage 6 chapter of Earth Mountain crushing descent, and they all fell back. The next one was Galahad, who thanked him because his competitors decreased in number because of him, and he was pulling out his sword for the duel. Balmung Dun Brown was born to the Count Brown family, who are famed for their swordsmanship. As appropriate for the son of such a family, he was born with an innate talent for wielding a sword. He rose to the position of vice commander of the 9th Battalion of the Imperial Knight before he was even 20. From that moment onward, his family's attention towards him became an obsession. While having dinner, his father asked him if he was sitting at his table with that sort of merit as, according to the rumors, Agnes Duchy's eldest son Babel started wielding mana at 14. He asked him if he didn't have to show others that he could at least surpass that, and his father wanted him to prove to others that he was the best constantly. but he was furious. Being in that environment, he became sick of everything and stopped putting effort into what he did. He felt so good being the vice commander, and even if he was not training, there was no one to criticize him. It made him feel alive while resting. The commander slammed the door and asked him if he was playing hooky again. The commander advised that if he could fix his laziness, he could become the best in the world. It was indeed a shame for him to be wasting his talent like this, and he apologized to the commander. He asked for the reason for coming there because he didn't think he would have come there to force him to train. He gave him the direct order issued by the Imperial for him, which is the perfect Imperial decree for someone as lazy as him. He instructed him to head to the Agnes Duchy immediately and proceed with the Mana identification test. And that was the day he began to change, the day he met Joshua. Despite being the child of a concubine, he displayed his brilliance to the world at the early age of 9. He thawed his frozen heart and made it beat again. He had once been a rising star, after all, so he wished to shine once again, even brighter than Count Joshua. Since then, he had worked hard, and with hard work, he could surpass everyone else. He wondered if that was his arrogance speaking, if it was his misjudgment, and if Joshua was an existence he could not surpass through hard work because he felt like an insurmountable being. At the present moment, the protagonist's next opponent was Galahad, and the Emperor was amazed by the aura force, including mana into Voce to suppress the enemy instantly. He never thought an application like this was possible and knew that Count Joshua was interesting as always, but to think that the Imperial Knight Order, that the Empire of Knights prides itself, would collapse so easily against him, who only just rose to the status of superhuman alone. If other nations saw this, they would not belittle Avalon, and he asked for his opinion from the commander, but he apologized to him as he would discipline them and set them strategists. They were stunned to hear that the second son of the Count Brown family, Valmon Dunn Brown, wishes to cross the sword with the Grandmaster Count Joshua and requests to accept a match against him first. The protagonist warns him that with his current level, he will never be able to win against him, so he should acknowledge his defeat and stand down. He was trembling with fear because of his incredible pressure, and his consciousness was fading, but he was trying to focus as he needed to protect himself from his killing intent by wrapping mana around his body. Then he ignited the mana in a single moment and asked him if he thought he would acknowledge defeat before even crossing blades, so he wished to fight against him with his ult to understand the gap between them completely. He requests not to think of standing his chivalric code, so the protagonist agrees and asks him to show him his skills as he will show him the difference between them. He attacked him while trying to hold back against it and realized that his current self could not even use the aura blade, and he wouldn't be able to defend against his aura. His only chance would be to strike from above and deflect his aura, so he must draw out as much mana as possible from his mana hole. To change the properties of Joshua's mana, he will have to control and change every single bit of it accurately, and decide to wrap the collision of mana around his aura, and he will manage to stop his attack. The main lead wonders if he could learn the aura of the overlay on his own without having seen it before. He thought he was a genius who surpassed Erebus, a genius beyond all geniuses, and he was stunned to see that the mana fragment that Valmon shot up into the air was changing its shape. He remembered that he had seen it before in his past life as the Brown family's ultimate move, and all the fragments changed to swords and were attacking him. Valmon used the Brown family's ultimate move, Rapid Star, and the words rushed toward him, but he used the magic spearmanship stage 4 eradication and got rid of all the mana swords. He was stunned as the ultimate move collapsed so effortlessly, and he knelt on the ground and assumed that his body could not handle using an intercepted aura to this degree, and he felt like strength was escaping from his body. The protagonist remarked that although it was only for a moment to think he could use power way beyond his class, he believed that if it were with his talent, he would be able to soar far and above. Valmon said that even if he told him, he could feel that it was his limit, and he admitted his defeat. The protagonist stated that motivation is essential if he wishes to surpass his limits, so he should keep an objective in mind. If it's the position of the Imperial Knit Order commander, isn't that something truly worth fighting for? He believes that if it's his abilities, then it's attainable. While Galahad is uncomfortable listening to this as he thinks it's discourteous of him to tell him to become the commander of the Imperial Knight Order. That was especially so if he suggests that they place someone with no will to put in the effort, like Valmon, in the commander position, which all the Imperial Knights treat as their motivation. He thought it would have the opposite effect. Valmon was speechless, and Joshua thought that even with his genius talent, he could not mature properly. And the issue was not because of his disposition but because of Galahad. The protagonist remarked that he is still selfish, intolerant, and black-hearted, and he wondered if he was saying it to him and asked him who he was to evaluate him when they hadn't even met before. He thought he didn't know how much he sacrificed for the Avalon Empire, but it seemed more likely to the protagonist that he feared Valmon's talent. He was sure that Valmon would, ultimately, surpass him at some point, and his talent would overshadow him. He was nervous since there had been little changes everywhere, but knowing that Galahad was still the same did make him a bit happy, as he would never be able to win against Valmon. And he thought it bullshit, and they started fighting. So the commander instructed all knights within the training hall to step back immediately, as they shouldn't get involved in the fights of superhumans. They were fighting so vigorously that all the knights ran away, and there was a chance of them getting caught up in the fight. Valmon was stunned because they were so fast that his eyes were having trouble keeping up, and he never knew that superhuman fights were that impressive. Commander Rod was pleased because although Joshua's method of using mana is interesting, Galahad still leads in terms of battle power, and in the superhuman class, battle victory and defeat can be decided by the mana method being used. Galahad's ability is Lightning God Dash, which is his secret move where he ignites every muscle in his entire body in an instant to tear his enemy apart, and his body is enhanced with an extreme amount of mana. It becomes tougher than steel and is very difficult even to scratch, but what is more frightening about it is its speed, and he thinks that even if it's Count Joshua, if he cannot notice his secret technique and eats a hit, he would be defeated. The commander was shocked because the protagonist was able to know about his secret move and attacked him while he was requesting Joshua to wait for a minute. But he cut his body and killed him. He rhymed using the mana voice. Since the war was over, the blood and flesh had turned into piles of dirt. He should not rage against his untimely death, and shouldn't even be sad about being forgotten, for it is because of him who shone brighter than anyone else that he still guard this land and should remember those noble sacrifices. So unleash his grudge through this spear. The sacred spirits of the dead who could not sleep in the depths of the earth magic spear arts unnamed him of the dead. The knights wondered why he killed him, as this was just a test, and the commander was furious and asked if he was out of his mind. He dared to harm a knight of the great royal family of Avalon, though he had turned a blind eye to his antics many times before. But he couldn't let him get away with it this time. He, the captain of the Imperial Knight Order, will execute him right there now and rush to attack him. He didn't expect Captain Rod to be so enraged by Galahad's death, and was sure he wouldn't listen to him in the present, so he needed to calm him down. His aura overpowered him, and the Emperor asked Duke Agnes if he was nervous because the commander was the top ranker of the 12 superhumans. He might hurt his insolent son, but this was funny because it was funny if he fixed his personality. Then, the Lord of Knights, the strongest sword of the Avalon royal family, would have made him respect the Knight Order and Avalon a bit more. Commander Rod was stunned to see him completely fine even after such a strong attack, and Joshua suggested stopping this fight there, and letting him spend some time explaining this. He does not want to listen to his nonsense because he murdered a knight of the Imperial Knight Order as if it were nothing in front of so many people, yet he was trying to get away with it. He wanted to make him pay for his crime. At that moment, while he went to attack him, the protagonist attacked him with his seer, but he jumped on his spear, attacked him, and ran away, and the protagonist was thinking of a way that wasn't dangerous, and would protect him from attack. He used magic spear arts, a level 6 field of earth attack, and the aura generated by this pushed him back. He was expecting it, but it seemed ridiculous to him, and still, he admits that the protagonist is powerful. He doesn't have a choice, so he will have to use his hidden skills to fight the 9 stars, and the protagonist informs him that Galahad murdered the 3rd prince. He was stunned and asked if he meant that the prince was killed by his escort, and he wondered if he wanted him to believe this nonsense. Joshua explained that it was the truth that was why he executed him according to the imperial law, but he thought he was spouting nonsense to get out of this. He uttered that he was only claiming that because he didn't know the 3rd prince. So Joshua said that the 3rd prince was an extraordinary person with a superior talent for swordsmanship. Since he was young, he was called by the same name as him, the Little Star, and if he was guessing right, the prince's skills must have surpassed Galahad's at the present moment. So he can't dine it alone unless he had someone helping him, and Rod shouts that the prince was never greedy for power, so no one had anything to gain, hurting him. He was right, so he wondered if he was messing with him. He asked what would happen if the prince had a reason to claim the throne. If the person already a remarkably talented sword gains political power, then no one around him lets him be since he has everything from power to talent. Commander Rod thinks he is jumping to a conclusion, but Joshua asks if he thinks it is just a conclusion. Where is the 3rd prince? He should return with his Galahad, so he questions that his absence is enough to make them believe it. He wanted a shred of concrete evidence because believing his imagination wasn't enough, and he remarked that even if it turned out to be accurate, how did he know about this all? But he just happened to overhear it, which made him furious because he stirred up all this madness without clear evidence. The knights were also furious and didn't want to listen to his words anymore, as Galahad had been making sacrifices for the Empire of Avalon his entire life. They want him to admit his crime and surrender instead of insulting their respected knight, and Cain appears, tells them to back off, and wonders how they dared to threaten his lord. They wonder who he is, and he replies that he is a knight of the great Count family, the first sword of Count Saunders Cain de Harry. They were shocked to see his aura blade and couldn't believe Count Joshua, who wasn't even 20 years old, had a knight like that as the personal guard. The protagonist thanked him for willingly stepping forward in such a dangerous situation, but he reminded him of his mission to protect his lord with all his strength. They were stunned since the knights of the Knight's Order were rushing there as they didn't want to stay behind to protect their captain. Langer explained that they were late because F. Katz was scared to show up, but Katz clarified that he wasn't scared as he watched what was happening. They push the Imperial Knights to reach their captain, and the knights wonder how they are acting as they don't even know them when it is obvious. Cain recognized them as they were from the 11th or 12th Battalion, but the protagonist added that they were now his knights, the Kreva's Knight Order. Commander Rod was infuriated and warned them that he would chop them all up if they didn't get out of their way. They shouldn't misunderstand that he will cut them some slack because they were in the same Knight Order. The protagonist stepped forward and reminded him of the most important thing, and he wondered what nonsense he would spout this time. He said they were wasting their time here while Galahad's partners probably got rid of the evidence, so they must act quickly. Neither of the forces behind it, Galahad himself, could have predicted his death today, so they should search all the places he stayed at, not just his dorm in the Knight's Order. They should also check his employees' residence and the house of Marquis Lancelot's house, and if needed, they should also check his corpse. He knew he might not believe him, but the longer he hesitated, the less evidence they would have to find the forces behind him. He inquired if he was scared to find out the truth, scared to realize that his most trusted subordinate was a traitor to the Empire of Avalon who had harmed the prince. The captain uttered that if there were no evidence on Galahad's body as he claimed, he would be held accountable for this and ensure it. He called medics to inspect his body, but someone reached there, killed the knights, and took the corpse with him. The captain ordered the knights to chase her and not let her leave the Accardi. While the protagonist knew it, she would be there too as she always stood by Galahad's side. Even on the day he died, he was leaving to chase the suspect, but he stopped him because he was still not cleared of suspicion, so he had to stay there and answer his question. The emperor ordered him to let him go because they had to check who that unknown mystery man was, and also, the present situation lent his words credibility, so they would give him another chance to explain himself. But the commander wasn't specific as there was a chance he might run away if they let him leave him, but he was okay with this, because he ran away. They could hold his father accountable for his crimes, as lacking a proper upbringing would be a parent's fault. He asked Duke Agnes if he was right, so he replied that His Majesty should do as he wished. Since they were done listening, he told him to catch the mysterious man as they would resolve the matter later. He looked at his father and left in the blink of an eye while Cain shouted why he was leaving without him again. But he also wanted to go along with him, so he left with him. The fourth prince contacted Evergrande, who greeted him and asked if something happened because he hurriedly called him. The prince said they ran into huge trouble, so he asked how long it would take to conquer the magic tower. He explained that it must take some time because Ian, the magic tower leader, has an unexpectedly high number of followers. However, some of his people are high-ranking mages, so that it wouldn't be too difficult. The prince was glad to hear it and supposed that the next time they met, he would be the tower master. He thanked him because it would be all thanks to him, and he asked him what had happened. So he explained that Galahad's helper leaked the information to Count Joshua, so he murdered him and is now digging into him. The magician was stunned and asked if it is true because this was an unexpected variable for them. He was sure that the helper couldn't leak the information because he is a devotee of Heimdall the same as them, and he was also connected to the Dark Monarch, one of the 9 stars. He was probably erasing evidence faster than anyone else, so they should wait and see more. The prince disagreed because he didn't want to let him move so freely without an insider, and supposed he might have something. He was sure that he would find the evidence of the third prince being murdered, and if that happened, all of their plans would be ruined before they even got to war, so he decided to act his way. So he instructed Evergrande to return as soon as the matter with the magic tower was resolved, and he agreed and requested the prince to stay safe until then. She reached a place with the body and looked behind. After confirming that no one was chasing them, she moved forward. The protagonist reached there, and Cain rushed to him, asking if he was planning to go inside because it seemed suspicious. He had something he needed to do, so he went there while he shouted to wait for him as he wanted to accompany him. After finally getting too close to him, he asked if he wasn't giving him too much of a hard time. Cain uttered that he had been training with his life online for such a day that he doesn't get to use this sword often. And Joshua wondered why he put so much effort into training with a sword. He wondered if he was doing this for him or if there was a different reason, so he explained that. At first, he did it to succeed as a knight. However, while serving him, he changed his mind because many things he showed him were beyond admirable, they were ideal. So he wanted his sword to resemble his as much as possible, and he was using this new sword just for him. That wasn't what he wanted to hear, and he told him to walk his path as he used to be the same as him and wanted to be sincerely helpful to someone because he was confident. Because nothing in the world terrified him if he had this spear in his hand. But the genuinely terrifying stuff was somewhere he hadn't even thought of. He remembers his past when Kaiser van Bjarteton became the ruler of Avalon, and he acknowledged his good deeds and conferred him the title of Archduke. He sincerely congratulated Joshua Sander and promised to bear this honor, and remain by his side until the end of his days. Galahad, the current captain of the Imperial Knights, congratulated him on his success and praised him. His great deeds in the magical country of Terra will forever remain in the history of the Avalon Empire, and he was very proud of him. He wanted to be a friend, so he asked for his permission, but he said that it had already been 20 years since they had known each other, so they were already the best of friends. He was delighted that he thought that way, so he wanted him to call him by his name, Galahad, since they were friends. Later, they killed him while he shouted to Kaiser van Britain that he shouldn't think this would end. Galahad was smiling and wondering who he thought he was because he was some undefeated spear knight who was going down so pathetically, and he bid his farewell to him. He told Cain that living for others isn't always fun, so he shouldn't say stuff like he will become his sword. He wanted me to live his life as Cain to Harry, not as Joshua Sanders' sword, if he didn't want to bear any regrets in the future. But he assured him that he wouldn't regret his chosen path, as the day he met him was the brightest moment of his life. He was okay even if he didn't understand him, but he only hoped that he knew his sincerity. While he was talking, the protagonist saw an arrow behind him. He immediately rushed back, hit the arrow, and instructed him to be attentive because they were not after an ordinary person. If they show the slightest hint of weakness, they will die in a heartbeat, so they get attentive to their surroundings. The protagonist estimated that there were hundreds of them because they were not coming forward. He wondered if they were trying to change time. He smirked as he expected such a strategy from them, so he could predict it all easily. He wanted to kill them even if the Dark Monarch ended up detesting him. He decided to crush anyone who stood in the way of his revenge, so he rushed toward them and attacked them. He saw Evangeline Crepa, Galahad's lover, and he used his demonic energy to wake up the Death Knight and Lord of Dullahan and bring him his prey and slay those who stand in his way. They changed their plans, so they told Krepots to secure Galahad's dead body. While they were running away, the Lord of Dullahan appeared before them and told them they could escape from his grasp. Since it was blocking his way, they changed their routes as they quickly needed to escape, but suddenly a light appeared before them. They were stunned as their way out was blocked from them. 2. The space around them also changed, and they were in the 8-demon realm of endless hell. They were looking around and wondering where they were while the protagonist moved to them with his knight and Lord of Dullahan, and they were stunned because it was surrounding them from all around. The whole unit of headless knights was there, so the protagonist smiled because it was the power of the Lord of Dullahan, a one-person army. Cain asks him if he called all those undead warriors by himself, so the protagonist says he now understands why he told him to live his own life. If he aims to bring forth the Demon King and turn the whole land into a sea of blood, what does he plan to do when Dullahan kills one of their men? The manufactured unleashed the Dark Death Formation, Opening Formation, and Dark Dragon Spikes and put their hand on the ground to surge their energy, which cracked it. Then they filled the cracks with the poisonous dragon mist to kill the Dullahan because the poison was coming out of the ground. Joshua instructed his knight not to breathe it in, so he covered his nose. They approached him and, using the War Dragon Claw, filled the claws with the aura and instructed their companions to get rid of the summoner first. So they all attacked him simultaneously. He used Magic Spear level 5, Commander of the Sun, which led to a colossal explosion that stunned them, and they died. After the smoke and dust were removed, they saw the Death Knight bringing Crepota, and he put her on the ground. She furiously looked at him and asked if he was a monster. The protagonist asks her if she is the true monster, and she wonders what he means. He says that she even thinks about how it feels to die alone and accessible without even knowing the reason, so now it's her turn to die. Lukia asks him why he is so talkative as he should kill her while he thinks he is gone, and asks why he is showing himself now. Lukia said he needed time to regain his memory, but for now, he should focus on his revenge instead of asking questions, as he is finally getting some proper revenge after all these years. He shouted to raise his spear and plunge it into her heart as he would make sure even her soul writhes in agony forever, and he was continuously telling him to kill her. He raised his spear to kill her and attacked her when his knight grabbed the spear and requested him not to kill her, but the spear was too heavy to stop. Aisha Sestrophy appeared, and he wondered why she was there, but she greeted him and stated that Kretop possessed important information, so if he killed her, her intel would be buried. He doesn't care about that and tells them to get out of his way. Otherwise, he would them, so Cain throws his sword on the ground and tells him to stab him first. He asked him if this was the life he had chosen, and he said yes and uttered that he didn't know what was going on but could at least differentiate between right and wrong. He is obligated to stop him from slaughtering others and guesses it is for them, but he always wants to stay by his side, even if he turns into the Demon King and loses his memories. He wondered why he would stay by his side even if he became the Demon King, so he said it was obvious because he was his first and last lord and would always be his lord. Preventing him from making the wrong choices is his duty as well, so he requests to end this killing. Aisha also believed that his knight was right, as they shouldn't kill Evangeline because she was the only one who knew where the third prince's body was. At the second prince's palace, the prince already had the hunch when Evergrande suddenly offered to side with him, but he was curious about what he was up to. He is the only one with dark intentions hidden in this royal palace, but Kaiser replies that he already knows his intentions very well. He knew why he was there and asked if he was there because he needed Cercerin, and he wanted to give her to him because she suited him well. He didn't know where he would use her power, but he was sure he could use it better than him, and his brother thanked him and ensured to return the favor. They were startled when they heard the call for the fourth prince to come forward and receive his punishment because he harmed the royal family and was a traitor plotting against it. He recognized Joshua's voice while calling him to come out instantly and subjected himself to the great judgment of the sun because he murdered the third prince, Calcian. While he was standing at the front door of the second prince's palace, the knights were blocking his way, but he was calling him out loudly to receive the punishment. Lukia was worried about him and sighed while Duke Anna saw this and asked if she was worried about Joshua. She greeted him. The Duke didn't know what she had heard around her, but she shouldn't think about leaving the mansion without permission because this wasn't the right time, so she should bear with it. But she wanted to go and see her son, so he told her to act with her position in mind, and he thought he could not pay attention to her while under Black Wind's surveillance. So he could only protect her in this fortress mansion, especially because the Jacqueline had disappeared. The Emperor Marcus might be up to something as he must be even more vigilant. Armstrong hurried toward him and stated that they were in trouble, and he wondered what was wrong. So he told the Duke that the Emperor had ordered an emergency summon as the Great Judgment of the Sun would be held after 2 decades. The Great Judgment of the Sun is a trial for royalty that has only happened a few times in the history of the Avalon Empire. Excluding crimes above treason, royalty is not held accountable for their transgressions. Moreover, even for crimes beyond treason, only the son of the Empire, His Majesty, could punish the royal member of the royal family. Therefore, it is incumbent upon all citizens to report any suspicion of treason by a royal family member to the imperial palace. The protagonist was standing in front of them with his knight and Evangeline. Since the imperial knights were holding the sword, he asked why they were hostile toward him because he is not a criminal. The emperor suggested not to sweat the small stuff, and instead of wasting time, he should get straight to the point. He inquired that he claimed that the fourth prince plotted the murder of the third prince, so he asked for concrete evidence to prove his claim. He said he had the proof and stated that he captured one of the people who backed Galahad, and she knew where the third prince's body and the evidence were. He told her to speak the truth about the corpse of the third prince and requested her to speak up for the sake of Edvan, the child she had with Galahad. She was startled and asked who he knew about Edvan and thought she had to protect her child. She stated that the fourth prince hired them to murder the third prince and make him into one of the undead, so they reanimated his corpse in a secret room in the basement of his royal palace. If they go into the basement, they will find the corpse of the third prince. This makes the first and second princes, but the emperor and the fourth prince are calm. The emperor said that if it's true that he murdered his brother and turned him into an undead, then it was the worst crime at all. But he can't believe Kaiser did such a thing, and if he asked him, he would probably say he didn't do it. The only option left is to search the secret room in the basement, but he could not sense even the slightest ounce of demonic energy inside the palace, So there was either no secret basement or the prince had someone skilled enough to hide the demonic energy on his side. So, to find that hidden demonic energy, they will need Hermes worshippers who are experts, which means they had to get the priest from the old empire, Hebalt, into his palace for investigation. The emperor cannot trust the world of the dishonest sinner and allow such fanatics into his palace, but he requested not to worry, because there is a way to solve this without the help of other nations. The emperor gives the key to solving this case, so they need to use it. The emperor wondered how he was aware of such a thing when unaware. Most importantly, he had already been there once as a battalion commander. He wonders if he is asking for special permission to enter again, and the first prince requests not to permit Count Joshua. Kisser uttered that even if such an object exists in the royal archives, then letting him in there would be the same as helping him, which would defeat the purpose of a judgment where everyone is supposed to be equal. That was why he thought the count must find the secret room in the royal palace where the undead were created by himself. The knights agreed with the prince that the judgment should be fair because the testimony can be tampered with, and no one knows her relationship with Galahad. They only had a testimony claiming that the fourth prince murdered the third prince, but no actual proof. The emperor tells him everyone's opinion, so he can't permit him to use the imperial archives, so he asks what he will do now. The protagonist wonders if Kisser was always close to him or if he was helping him as his brother. Whatever the reason is, the odds are against him, so he has to take the chance. The emperor inquired if this was the only way he could prove his case, so should he consider him guilty of disdain against the royal family. He was left with no other option, so he agreed to find the secret basement room himself. He asked for permission to search the fourth prince's palace. Commander Rod told him to stop using his aura because he was before the majesty, and if he didn't stop, he wouldn't sit quietly but was stunned because he cut his arm. The protagonist claimed he is also exceptionally talented with divine power, and had no problem detecting the demonic energy, so he could find the secret basement room fine without a Habalshan priest. But if they still refuse to permit him, he will do his best to protect himself. Rod yielded his sword against him and asked if he were saying he would wield his blade against his majesty, and thought it was such a blatant treason. Joshua understands that his action might be discourteous, but isn't that why the words are double-edged? Well, he thought that from now on, the fight would be head-on. The emperor was furious as he couldn't stand to watch that reckless daredevil rampage any longer. But if he lost him here, he wouldn't have any more tricks to manipulate Arden. He had no choice but to give up the undead army and choose Arden, and he thought he should run wild if he could because as soon as the tables were turned, he would abandon him. He allowed him because Kaiser was framed. He wanted him to investigate and clear his name, so he assigned him as the investigator of the fourth prince palace. He allotted him 2 days to find the undead of the third prince within that duration, but if he failed to find it, he would have to pay the price. Later, they were at first prince's palace and wanted to ally with him and assured him that it would be temporary until they took down Count Joshua. He might also be aware that he had become the liability and a pan for everyone, so the sooner they get rid of him, the better off they will be. Kisser had no intention of winning over him. Instead, he was waiting for him to come out like this, so his brothers realized that he just needed an excuse to fight him and thought it would help them all. Kaiser realized that the self-serving Kisser didn't plan on embracing Joshua, and concluded that the information regarding Cheryl de Pontier might be accurate. The prince wanted to get something straight if they were going to be allies, and would like to hear from him if he murdered Caislian and turned him undead. He admitted that he murdered his brother and is undead now in the Imperial Palace basement, and he knew he had a rough idea, too. He asked if he could have done it all on his own without anyone finding out and asked them who they thought was lacking him. They were stunned if their father was supporting him and if he told him to kill his brother to get to the throne. But they couldn't believe he did that. Kaiser said he backed him but was just a spectator. If they want something, they should take it themselves by any means necessary. Unlike his brother, he has no power and no one to back him because he is the fourth prince, so he is even more desperate and willing to do anything. So he was practicing what their father taught him. But his goal was not to be emperor but to be number 2, someone no one could look down on because excessive greed always ends up with rope around their throat. The second prince was shocked because a guy like this took a massive risk to kill Caislian and asked if he was saying they could end up like him if he or his elder brother didn't become the emperor. Kisser agreed with him because of what their father taught them and thought he would be the same if he were last in line like him. But if Joshua finds the secret room that day, then the fourth prince's seat will be no more, so he wonders if that alliance is even necessary. He assured them that he wouldn't be able to find it no matter what because the mage who hid that chamber was, as far as he knew, the best in the history of his field. He wouldn't feel any demonic energy coming from it and wouldn't even find the barrier stopping it, so they don't need to worry about it. The next day, at the fourth prince's palace, the protagonist finds the secret basement room in the fourth prince's palace, and the knight can't believe this. Kaiser was shocked as the knight's mana hall and a mage circle mana were of different types, so he wondered how he could find a barrier made by a mage. Moreover, this was a 6th class barrier spell that even a mage couldn't have found, but Joshua told him there was nothing to be so shocked about. He told him to relax because he didn't even start yet. Langer and Cage were pleased and instructed Captain Rod to ensure the prince didn't go anywhere. Langer told him to follow the commander Joshua, and they were ready to explore the basement the prince was hiding in. The commander asked him whether this was all. Because the truth was revealed, he instructed Barubaru to kill all of them, and they were startled by the noise from the basement. At Neutral City, Reinhardt, Moondor HQ, Zero informed his master that they received the message from the team serving as an eye on Avalon Empire, who say that Duke Arden's troops are on the move. She realized that they were trying to start a continental war as making the first strike in these peaceful times without cause and openly gathering makes it obvious. Lily's Aphrodite realized that they seemed to be in full-scale preparation for war, and he also thinks that was the case. The appearance of the Lick and Castle Reb also appears to be part of the Avalon Emperor Marcus's plan to create and weaponize the undead for war. In that case, if the undead army joined them and marched there, it would be their defeat, so he thought they should find the Holy Grail as soon as possible to stop them. She wonders if Joshua didn't tell him that the Holy Grails rest in the royal archives so they can do nothing about it right now. But he thought they shouldn't sit and wait for him because he started the Great Judgment of the Sun against a royal family member, so his defeat in that trial could push them further away from the Holy Grail. She realizes he still doesn't know what kind of person Joshua is, so she tells him that he never loses. Meanwhile, Katz and Langer are worried and wonder what's happening as they feel like something is leaving their bodies and wonder if their soul was leaving their body. But the commander said it was not what they thought as it was sucking them into the secret underground room and instructed them to stay alert as they might get separated. So they all were pulled inside, and only the fourth prince was left untouched. He thought Barubaru would love it as he had so much material to make more undead and wanted them to be reborn and return as obedient dogs. The protagonist was at a strange place, and Luja suggested to get his act together as there was an uncanny presence there. He heard the sound coming from behind and saw the group of ghouls and licks coming from behind, and he cursed Kaiser as he had such a substantial undead army down there all this time. Lick grumbled, and all the undead rushed toward him. Luja said that he could sense the undead not only there, but there were even more on another floor, more than 10,000 of them. He wondered how big that place was to have another floor, but that wasn't important as that enormous undead army would soon be there. The protagonist wonders what he has been yapping on about since earlier, so Luja says that he means they should snatch away the meal the prince prepared so diligently for himself. He couldn't even use what he had been preparing for so long, so they should take this away from him as that would be better revenge for him. He told him to stay still and entrust himself to him, so a bright light emerged from his spear, and he told the undead to worship him and submit themselves to him. The being they revere and serve is a trivial creature to him, so that he will be their new master. And the mark of the crimson moon appeared on the Lick and all of the undead necks. They all knelt before him, so Luja suggested that Joshua go to all other floors, dominate the undead, and take them to their side. While on the other floor, Barubaru appeared. The commander Rod wondered who he was, so the Lick asked him if the Lord of Knights was curious about him. He was stunned and wondered how he knew him. Lick Hines smiled and uttered that he knew him as one of the 12 superhumans and an eventual subordinate of his. The captain said that if he knew him, then he should also be aware that he didn't put up with bullshit, and he attacked him. The knight was stunned to see such a massive force generated by the slash attack of Captain Rod as they expected, but was shocked as it was fine after taking a direct hit. When they looked behind, they saw him absorbing the slash attack and told them that their skill would be coming back at them. He was sure that the Lord of Knights might be able to live after being hit by this, but only if others could cope with this. The captain looked back and was worried because the attack was coming back to them, but it was too late for them to go back and block the attack. Valmon attacked the Lick as he couldn't let him do that, and the captain also attacked him, thinking to behead him in one fell swoop so that he wouldn't get caught in the crossfire. Lick pushed them back, which stunned Valmon, and he wondered what kind of magic made him so strong of the mage that he could parry Captain's sword from that distance. The captain was impressed because he could wield the aura blade now, and Lick wondered if that was a big deal for him, so he assumed that the knights hadn't made any progress. He thought he was pretty famous in his time, yet he is like that now, and he could bet that the rest of the knights would be even less worthy of his glance. But to him, even in the past, he was nothing but a lump of meat, and the captain remembered that he was the only battle mage on the continent who couldn't be defeated by a knight at close quarters. That person was Zerath Dick Orvis, and he wondered why he was there, as he had been missing for decades and heard that he had died. The Lick said he spent too much time on a man about to die, so now, instead of perishing him, he would reborn him and make him his faithful servant. The undead rushed to them to attack, and he instructed the knights to raise their aura as much as he could, as they needed to hand them in until reinforcements arrived. It was about to kill them when the captain appeared and stopped the attack, but such a bright light appeared because the undead sword technique dazed their eyes, and they couldn't see anything. The Rod wondered how the enemy used the sun sword technique that only Britain's bloodline could earn, and inquired what he did to Prince Jaslian. Lick told him that he would find out soon, and he attacked them and moved his hand to take them with him. And the magic circle appeared around the captain. He suggested he wished for power, and he died as his rage and hatred would become his purpose, so that his unfulfilled accomplishments would become shackles that he bore long after his death. Valmon is frustrated and can't believe he is that powerless, but he can't let the captain die. And the protagonist appears. Lukia said that they were lucky because if they did well there, they could get another master of a minor demonic realm as a subordinate. Barubaru wondered another one, so Lukia realized that he could hear his voice too, and as expected, he was worth the hype. He wondered how he had the demonic energy if he was a demon, and asked how he opened that door. The protagonist was glad to be able to meet him finally, and Lukia said that he would take his body and the Death Knight he had got himself. The protagonist pulled them inside the opening, and Valmon wondered what was going on and how Joshua suddenly popped out to take them all, and all the knights were left behind. They were at the 8 demonic realms of endless hell, and Barubaru laughed and asked if that spear was Bangma, but Joshua wondered what that was. He explained that the demons who have lost most of their power and are sealed in a medium are called Bangma. Many demons in the demonic realm seal their defeated opponents in a weapon to increase their power. In that case, it does not lose all of its power, and the one who wields the weapon could use it to some extent. If not for that, he may create sealed demons as a sign of victory, and he thought his sealed demon might be quite humiliated as its existence is proof of his defeat. It seemed to him that his sealed demon had abilities that leaned towards spatial manipulation. That is how it could open the door to this place. Spatial manipulation was more of a secondary skill than a battle skill, so that he would turn into Bangma. But the protagonist said that he got it wrong because this endless hell isn't one of the spear abilities. Lukia told him to get a whooping from him, and the Lick thought they wasted much time on the introduction and should do what they wanted. Joshua, Death Knight, asked permission to take care of the opponent, Death Knight, because he said he always wanted to experience Avalon's Sun Sword technique in person. The protagonist thinks if the Death Knight is the third prince, he used the Sun Sword technique, which only the royalty of Avalon could learn. Lick thinks he is ungrateful as he brings him back to life and allows him to ascend impossible heights, yet he betrays him. He said that he would get rid of them once and for all and show them why he was called the continent's best battle mage. So the protagonist replied that he would also show him why he is called the Spear Knight, and the Death Knight started fighting. While Barubaru attacked the protagonist by sending the evil spirits, which tied down his spear to the ground, he rushed toward him to attack and show his unique black magic creation, the Dark Hole. The protagonist left his spear, rushed toward him, and said he didn't have to look to know what it was. While punching him, he asked if he thought he could defeat him by sealing his spear. There was no chance of this. Barubaru increased his magic barrier and mocked him as he dared to think he could block his magic with his bare hands. So he decided to shrink his spirit and mana and make them disappear forever. Joshua clarified his misunderstanding as he was the one who was disappearing, not him, and he used magic spear arts level 6 unarmed on his magic. He wonders what is happening because his dark hole is reversing, and he is getting pulled in, not him. The protagonist used an annihilating black sphere, which pulled Barubaru inside the hole, and he thought it was vain and couldn't believe his skill had taken him down. It was so unbefitting for the continent's best, as now he would with his spirit sealed in the dark hole forever. Meanwhile, Altsma was fighting with the Death Knight, and the Death Knight hit his sword. He rushed and attacked him but grabbed his sword. He wonders how he is using such obvious tricks and assumes he is trying to give him an easy victory, so he attacks him and falls to the ground. He asked why he wouldn't show his accurate skills to him, so he uttered that he learned martial arts for his satisfaction. He further said that he didn't covet the position of the emperor nor had any interest in forming his forces, so he left the royal family. Then, his mother suddenly went missing under questionable circumstances, so he went to find her, and the protagonist realized that he was indeed the prince. Lukia suggested quickly taking him by his side before disappearing, but he was reluctant. So he asked if he was saying stupid things like he was a prince, So he told him to wake up as he became a Death Knight of his own free will, so if he genuinely cared about him, he shouldn't let me disappear. He thinks for a while and says that although he can't promise to give him what he wants, uncovering the truth isn't as simple as hitting someone to solve things. However, if he made a contract with him, he could guarantee one thing: he would do everything he could to help him. He asked if he would form a contract with him, and he looked at him and thought that the words had different powers depending on who said them. But if it was this man, he could believe him. The prince said that if it was him, he could believe even the impossible might become possible, so he agreed to form a contract with him and asked for his name. He told him his name, and they moved straight to the contract. The prince commented that he had a good name and said the third prince would serve his new master forever. After making the contract, he heard the sound saying that he was annoying and always getting in their way. But whether it was for better or worse, being trapped in there, he knew one thing for sure: why was the best star of the heavenly and demonic realms combined in a middle realm like this, with the weapon with a demon sealed inside. 2. He wonders what's wrong as he traps him in the annihilating black sphere. Still, he is talking. Lukia clarified that the voice he hears isn't Barubaru but the culprit who formed the contract with Zerath Dik Orvis and created the Lick, Asmodeus 32nd top demon. Presently, he was a mere rank 32 demon, but he was once one of the 7 demon kings with sinister powers. Long ago, his evil influence spread beyond the demonic realm, and to the middle realms where humans, elves, and other races lived. It spread so much that he seemed to rule the entire world. But his greed didn't end there. Eventually, he sought the heavenly realm only to be thwarted by one of the 7 archangels, Raphael, and in that battle, Raphael and Asmodeus inflicted fatal wounds on each other. Many years later, he reappeared and said things were getting interesting. The protagonist told him to stop that nonsense and show himself, but that was a bit difficult for him to do right now, so he assured him that he would get a chance to see so he wouldn't be impatient. He threw Barubaru down and said that he worked hard trying to obtain this body, but since today was the honorable day he met him, he gave it to him as a gift. He was looking forward to their next meeting with Demon God Armament, and he was stunned and told him to wait, but he had already disappeared. They saw the light appear behind them, and they wondered what was happening suddenly as a tremendous amount of divine force broke the barrier of the endless hell. Altsma uttered that the force was blowing away the force that held their bodies together and stated that the summons were being forcibly lifted. The barrier broke, and he saw Aristen standing outside with Jesholt Khan Tremblin, who finally found him and realized that the object was practical. He asked why they were there and where the other troops were, so Duke Jesholt told him not to worry because the medics had them. He asked him if he recognized that object and uttered that, as he said, the 4th prince requested to find the key to solve the matters in the royal archives. Who would know that the Holy Grail of the Hubalt Empire would be hidden inside the royal archives of the Avalon Empire? From what he heard, this Holy Grail reacted to demonic energy immediately. He found it strange as the white Jolly Grail was turning red before him, and he thought its power was incredible. Even without any knowledge of how to use divine power, these two destroyed the Lord of Durahan's endless hell and temporarily blocked his summon. Ares said he doesn't know how he did it, but black magic and demonic energy are forbidden all over the continent, and he knows what that means much better than they do. He loved to tell him to take this aura obediently, but the protagonist attacked him, and still, he appeared and said it's alright as he should let it all out and wanted to have a proper fight with him. He attacked him, but the protagonist attacked back using the spear which he dodged that still left a scratch on his face, so he asked if he was trying to kill him by poking him with his spear. But he liked it because it was so exciting and Duke Jesholt stopped them as it was enough jokes. He told him that this was putting them into more difficult spots because it was an imperial order, so they had to be better off obediently following them. Joshua knew that Duke Jesholt rose to the highest position of a star with his swordsmanship alone, surpassing superhumans. The difference between the two is that of the sky and the land, and he thought he was an even more challenging opponent to deal with than Lick. Even among the other 9 stars acknowledged by the continent, he is called the Sword King. He cursed the prince for involving him in this mess and thought he was genuinely mistaken if he thought he would fall into his trap, and he disappeared. Ares shouted, asking why he was running away, and to come back as he planned such a thrilling date for him. On the other hand, at the same time, in the magic tower, Theta was kneeling on the floor with the blood dripping out of his arm, and he couldn't feel any mana, so he cursed Evergrant and wondered what he did. While his surrounding was burning, Evergrant said that in an environment like this with no mana, a low-grade mage like him using magic would end up poisoning himself. He was startled, thought it ridiculous, and wondered if he was using magic freely, even in the environment without the mana. For something like that to be possible, He must reach the ultimate level of magic usage in the 8th class, and Evergreen said that now he will teleport him back forcibly. Then he will blame him for everything that happened in the magic tower, but before he does that, he will destroy his magic circle so he can never use mana again. He yelled to shut up as his grandfather gave him the chance to be the magic tower master, and he stabbed him in the back. He tells him to frame him all he wants, but he will never escape being labeled a traitor as he can't hide his deeds today either. Evergreen thought it was joking that the cat hit it and asked him if